Okay, Doc.
So this one's a much shorter one. I was wondering if testosterone or HG can cure social anxiety depression, but mostly social anxiety. I'm not sure if you mean HGH or HCG, but certainly testosterone has been known as an antidepressant since at least the 1960s. I've been looking for the article I read from the 1950s, but I know just from memory that we treated females, and I say that because most people say, oh, well, testosterone is a male drug only, certainly way back then, but we were treating females with depression with testosterone way back when in the 1950s. It is a natural antidepressant, and I see it day in and day out where, and I know we've done a video on this about depression and antidepressants, and 35 to 45 people come in about that same time when hormones are going the wrong way and they get on antidepressants because doctor goes, depression? Oh, antidepressant. Well, let's use an SSRI. Well, by definition, depression occurs, unless you get a bonk on the head to change your chemistry, late teens, early 20s, period. That's the Bible, DSM, soon to be DSM-5, that we know that. So I'm just telling you what we know as physiology. So yeah, if your testosterone has dropped off, this person hasn't suggested if they're male or female, if they're hypogonadal or not, but if you're hypogonadal, for sure, that could be a source of depression and anxiety. Remember, sense of well-being, that sense that you wake up at 2 in the morning, sleep is an issue for a lot of people, and it comes in sort of as an ancillary topic, but they mention, and I'm not really sleeping well either. Well, why? You wake up at 2 in the morning after your first 4-hour sleep cycle, assuming you went to bed at 10, and then you have enough energy to start ruminating again. The 2.3 kids and a mortgage, and you go, oh my God, and you can't go back to sleep.
Right.
When you were 18, you were like, whatever it was. I know you didn't have 2.3 kids and a mortgage back then, but you didn't get the right date for the prom or whatever, which I know it seems silly, but to you back then it meant a lot. So relatively speaking, say, shut up, brain. There'll be another girl I'll meet down the road, and you go back to sleep. Without the testosterone, you don't have that sense of well-being to say, whatever, I'll handle it in the morning when I get up. And so anxiety can be furthered by a lack of appropriate amounts of testosterone. Anxiety and depression are definitely linked. The way I look at it, there's 2 kinds of depression. You have the flow everyone talks about. When you're in the flow, when things are going well, you're not depressed. You can have a blockage in the flow if you have too much energy for the pipe diameter, if you will. What happens if you try and put a pipe this big into a pipe this big all at once? You got a bottleneck, literally, in some cases, right? So whatever passes that bottleneck is limited in flow, and that creates depression. Okay, and that's made from anxiety and getting one furthers the other. It's too much energy, in other words. Then you can have the opposite type, where you just have no flow going down a pipe this big. You've got about that much water at the bottom of the pipe, and that also creates a different kind of depression. Most of what we see in modern day, because we're healthy, we got a lot of stuff going on. It's not like you have a deficiency in B vitamins or you're not getting enough nutrition. The depression is from just being wound up in the 21st century and at bottlenecking. So, you get that anxiety level down and you go, hey, it's okay, I'm feeling good, and I can get rid of some of that extra energy by going to the gym and all this stuff we know that's good for us, and I'm not going to grab a bite of the wrong food to make myself feel even worse. The anxiety comes down, and along with that, the depression goes away. As well as, again, just plain and simple, testosterone is a natural antidepressant. If you are naturally, your whole life, wound up, type A, then I will draw an exception and say, hey, remember, testosterone doesn't turn you in to Mr. Hyde from Dr. Jekyll, okay? It will turn you in, it will give you more energy to be whoever you are.
Right.
So if you're naturally, wound up, and I'm not making fun, I'm just saying, then yeah, giving yourself more energy to be wound up might be a mistake. But in this case, you can simply say, well, like I do in practice, say, well, when you were, assuming this person's 50, when you were 25, were you anxious all the time? No, life was great, I never worried about a thing. Okay, this implicates maybe low testosterone, and again, as you said earlier, test.
Right.
I mean, at least start there,
right,
and see if it jives with your symptoms.
There you go. Good question. You got an easy one, Doc?
Well, it's a short one.
Short one.
A little easier this way, right? I'm an old Ask the Doc. Oh, in an old Ask the Doc, Dr. Rand mentioned that certain neurotransmitters can sometimes help with one's sense of well-being. Absolutely. Can you ask him to talk a little bit about options he might use there. Assuming test levels are already solid, but one's mood and sense of well-being aren't where they'd like them to be. Well, first let me state I'm not a trained psychiatrist or a psychologist or anything like that. I've been a few rounds with a psychopharmacologist friend of mine who I thought was awesome. He was an MD and an engineer, and so watching him work was phenomenal because I'd see the results and I'd actually go back to, this was in medical school, and they'd say, oh well, a minimum dose of you pick the SSRI is X amount, and this guy would be using 1/10. He would be razor blading these tablets to these patients. Say, try this first, and working their way up, because he knows, like we all should know, one size does not fit all. So anyway, again, I disclaim I'm not an expert in this, but I do know a lot about what we know so far about neurotransmitters. One of the things that can affect your sense of well-being, the first thing, there are basically three, I would say, okay? GABA, choline, acetylcholine, and dopamine, okay? Well, I'd say four, excuse me, beg your pardon. I forgot serotonin, one of the big ones, okay? 4 neurotransmitters. Serotonin tends to give you that feeling that you had when you were 16 and you smelled, and pardon me if you're Muslim and you don't eat, or Jewish and you don't eat bacon or whatever, but the smell of bacon in the morning on a Sunday, and hey, the world is great and everything's chill and I'm about to get a good meal and got a good night's sleep. That's what serotonin does. It sort of just makes you chill. Not like GABA, which does something similar when you talk about chill, in the sense that GABA is what is the receptor that's effectuated by alcohol, gabapentin, a receptor that's like it, which benzodiazepines, Valium, tend to activate. That's more of like a, hey, kind of knock you out sort of chill, as opposed to, it's just kind of chill. Does that make sense to you? So, okay, hopefully it'll make sense to the listeners. And then you have acetylcholine, which is more responsible for your brain firing, executive function, calculating, the square root of 565 or something like that. And then you have dopamine, which tends to give you energy, but is also that feel-good hormone. So why a lot of people will snort cocaine and get addicted to it, because they're short in dopamine. It's the only thing that makes them feel better, like you're supposed to. Sex can make you feel better. There's that dopamine release sometimes that you get that you go, wow, okay. Remember that dopamine can get converted into noradrenaline, epinephrine, things that also give you energy. So and I'm explaining all these typically, so this person can say, well, oh, that one's me, not that one. But typically, if you're saying, I don't have a sense of well-being, I would look to either the serotonin first, which doesn't mean I'm right at all. I mean, I could be dead off, or a dopamine enhancer. If it's a lack of well-being because of just kind of depressed, don't have much energy, maybe throw something in there that bounces up your dopamine. Anything, you've got a cascade of hormones, phenylalanine and tyrosine. They're all related to in that I told you conversion. Dopamine, adrenaline, eventually. So that you might try, and just phenylalanine. DL phenylalanine actually helps with pain control. If there's any chronic pain, making them feel off. Meaning, the racemic mixture of I don't want to get too technical, but not just L-phenylalanine, but dextrorotary, DL-phenylalanine. And there's some studies. Guys can look it up on the internet. I won't waste time on our video here, but that would be a way to go. And you can. They're all non-pharmaceutical. You don't need a doctor to go out there. So, what raises serotonin levels without an SSRI? 5-HTP. Take a couple 300 milligrams at night right before you go to bed. See if that, and you can take it during the day too. See if that doesn't help with a sense of well-being. If that doesn't work, scrap that one. Maybe you need a GABA enhancer. There's so many GABA enhancers out there. Taking GABA itself, probably not the best idea, because the half-life is so short. But things that can mellow you out in there are actually might be better to go the RX route, but non-controlled substances route. You don't have to try a benzodiazepine, Xanax, Valium, or whatever, but gabapentin is one that's fairly, I shouldn't say it this way because it all depends, but on a relative scale, it's less addictive and therefore possibly harmful than, say, a benzodiazepine. But there's L-taurine, for example, you can take, which tends to chill you out in big dose, 4 to 6 grams, 3 or 4 times a day. That you can try. That doesn't work. Again, L-tyrosine, the phenylalanines, precursors to dopamine. And then what was the other one I didn't address? And acetylcholine. That typically isn't one that people complain about when they're talking about not feeling up to snuff. That's usually they're saying, hey, I feel dumb. I feel like I'm a step behind when I'm talking to people, because that's more for executive function. So when, that would be the last thing I would try if you're saying you're not really feeling in a good mood or whatever. Okay.
Good. Thank you, Doc.